Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Abby.
Welcome to episode 8 of Oxford from the Inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Today we are joined by Elle. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Elle. I've just finished my second year of studying law at Worcester College, University of Oxford. So since arriving in Oxford, I've been involved in a lot of access work, including starting my own YouTube channel called Elle the Law Student, because I was a student on Unique, which is a free summer school for state school students in 2017. And that's how I kind of came to Oxford. And so I've sort of experienced firsthand how important it is to do this access work. So I'm super excited to be chatting today.
Oh, that's really, really great to hear. And I think that also, like your introduction, gives us lots of questions to ask later on in the interview. So that's really cool. So yeah, welcome to the show. Today we'll be talking about applying to do law at Oxford and Elle's personal story. So yeah, let's just get into it. So I guess the first question would be your experience of Unique and how that sort of shaped your applications to Oxford.
Yeah, definitely. So the reason that I actually applied to do Unique was because I didn't know whether law was for me. I think when you're picking a degree, it's so important to kind of know the good, the bad and the ugly about it, so that, you know, this is like 3 or 4 years of your life that you're going to dedicate to it. And so Unique was the only like free summer school I could find, because some summer schools you just pay like thousands of pounds for them. It's pretty crazy. So I was just looking up for different open lectures and that kind of thing, so I could get a real insight into the course. And Unique came up, and so I kind of applied on a whim, and then found out that I got in to the course, which was really cool. And so I went down to Oxford for a week at the end of year 12, so that was 2017. And it was just like a week of chatting to other prospective students, chatting to current students. We did some mock lectures. We did a tutorial actually, and a mute, which is like a mock criminal trial. And I kind of came away thinking, yeah, this is something I really want to study. I found everything really engaging. I found myself kind of going away wanting to find out more. And I think that that's a really good sign that this is something that you could study for quite a long time.
That's
Really, really
fab, yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Really cool, yeah. Because I know like I went, because we both went on Unique, me and Mary as well. And like I think that definitely consolidated my sort of like want to do earth sciences, and I'm sure same for you, Mary, for biochemistry. And I was just wondering, like, why did you apply for law, like over other subjects?
Yeah, definitely. So I was actually going to do an English and history degree, and I'd had my heart set on that for literally years. Like that was kind of my thing. At A level, I decided to do history, English literature and English language because I loved like those subjects so much. And then when I kind of came to applying and looking at all of the course details, it just didn't feel quite right. Like I just couldn't see myself studying it for 3 years. Most of the courses were very much focusing on medieval literature and ancient history. And that wasn't really what I was interested in. I was always super interested in 20th century history, civil disobedience, looking at authors like Maya Angelou. Like that's kind of what I did all of my coursework on, because I just loved their work. And so then when I came to kind of looking at the course specifications, it didn't really interest me. Like I found it kind of interesting, but not to the extent I could see myself doing this for like 4 years. And so I kind of started to think, well, what can I see myself studying for that long? And I'd always been really interested in things like politics. So I would always watch the news in the morning and just kind of form opinions on these kind of things. And then I thought, well, maybe law would be good because there's a lot of transferable skills in English and history in terms of into law. There's a lot of like forming opinions and essay writing and those kind of things. And so I went to some open lectures that I could find, and then Unique. And that's kind of how I made that sort of journey from English and history to law.
So you said you liked politics before. So why didn't you look into more politics degrees or maybe PPE? What drew you to law?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it was actually this kind of misconception that you kind of need a degree that's in like a strong subject. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think it's something like, especially when you look at the access figures for Oxford, you find degrees like medicine and law always attract people from state school backgrounds, like disproportionately in comparison to other subjects. And I feel as though that's part of this idea that you need to, if you're going to go to university and you're going to spend all this money, you need to have something like you need to have like a proper career goal that's going to be at the end of that, like, you know, you're going to become a doctor or you're going to become a lawyer, and I think I was probably like swept into that. I think it kind of made me feel a bit more stable knowing that I could study law and I'd become a lawyer, which is kind of funny because now I'm kind of bordering more towards the like academic side of law, so kind of completely flipped over. But I think that maybe it's just that kind of misconception that, you know, if you do a degree like politics, there's kind of not so many places to go with that, when realistically any kind of degree has so many transferable skills and you can end up in some really cool jobs regardless.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made that point, because I think people do think, like you said, that we are told in state schools, you know, that the jobs are like lawyers or doctors and things, and they don't tell you that you can do any degree that you're really passionate about, and then there's so many job opportunities there available to you. Like, even as a science student, I could go into law myself, or
Yes.
you know, there's so many things you can do, and it's great like to highlight that there are many avenues, and you should just do what your heart wants you to do.
100%, yeah.
So you mentioned about state schools. So are you yourself from a state school then, I assume? Yeah.
So I went to a non-selective, just bog standard comprehensive school near Sheffield, and it was like, I can't credit my teachers enough. Like, my teachers were fantastic, although I had a couple of teachers who kind of tried to dissuade me from Oxford, that was actually quite a rare thing. Like, it was my head of sixth form who first kind of said, oh, you should maybe consider looking at Oxford or Cambridge, and although I wouldn't say they had the experience of sending people to Oxford and Cambridge, they were so encouraging. And that's why I'm always just so in awe of people who've actively at every single stage had people discourage them, because quite honestly, when my head of sixth form suggested Oxford, I literally just laughed in his face and completely ignored him. And so the fact that there are some people who are told throughout that they aren't good enough for Oxford and then still apply, like, amazes me, because for me, like, I was my own worst enemy. I can't imagine having that like drive to kind of overcome all of these things. So yeah, I really admire people who do that.
Yeah, I agree, because I remember like my school was very, very encouraging, but sometimes you'd have teachers saying things like, oh, but it's okay because you've got the 4 other options, so like, you know, and always sort of hinting as in, you're probably not going to get in, but it's cute that you've done it. And even that used to like hit me down a bit and be like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. So the fact that, like you said, some people get it constantly, like you won't get into Oxbridge, is, yeah. And I think it's great to highlight that even though we're all from state schools, we do have different experiences, and you can't just sort of group us all into one area. Yeah. So I guess that leads us on to the application process for Oxford. So the first step is personal statement writing, I suppose. So how did you tackle that?
The wrong way, to be perfectly honest. So I really like chatting to students now about personal statements, because I feel as though talking to a lot of admissions tutors and just like the access team in Oxford has helped me to understand how you should write a personal statement. So the way I kind of went about it was very much like based on what my school had told me, and that just didn't really work for Oxford. From what I've kind of found out, thankfully Unique like saved me a bit, but my school's advice was very much like, you need to say what career you want to go into and how you're going to get there, and how like university fits into part of that plan. And in hindsight, I just really don't think that that's the best idea at all, because like ultimately I think in my personal statement that I wanted to like become a solicitor, but realistically I had no idea what a solicitor did. I just knew it was a type of lawyer, and like now I can't imagine anything worse than becoming a corporate solicitor. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not me at all. And so I think I put like one sentence at the end saying, studying law will help me to pursue my dream of becoming a solicitor. And I'm glad that I only wasted one sentence saying that, because it was just, there was no need. So but I think the good things that I did include was like engaging with all of the extra reading and that kind of thing that I'd done. Because I think it's so easy when you're told that you need to prove your interest in a subject to kind of be like, well, I've read these 100 books and I'm passionate about law. And like anyone can just write that. And maybe you have read those books, but like just reading something doesn't actually show anything. And so I think that what I didn't do, but what I would always say you should do, is engage with whatever you've read. So you know, like, what did you agree with about that book or podcast or TV show or whatever? What did you disagree with? What did you kind of take from that and then want to explore further? Which I didn't do, but I think I definitely would do it now. Yeah, I think that the only way that I did kind of bring in those things and did make it a bit more personal, because that's in the name, was that I discussed the Hillsborough inquiry, which, because I'm from Sheffield, was something like that happened like quite locally. And so I think because of that, it became a bit more personal. I did put in my own opinion a little bit more, which I wish I'd done, rather than just list like, I've read these 5 books to do my EPQ. And yeah, so I think just making it personal, as the name suggests.
Yeah, I think that is a big misconception with personal statements, is that you don't have to have done a million different things to write that down. You know, it is how you engage with it, and that's what's going to impress the tutors. So yeah, definitely. And what exactly did you put into your personal statement? What sort of super curriculars did you do?
Yeah, so I think the Hillsborough inquest was kind of like I remember that being like my opening sentence, because I think, again, my school was like, you need to have a hook, which is just nonsense, you don't. But like, yeah, my school was like, you need to have a hook. And so I put the Hillsborough inquest in my first paragraph, I think. But that was genuinely something that I was interested in. It was something that had really sparked my interest in law, and helped me to understand that there are always so many different sides to any particular case. And so I introduced that and kind of what I'd researched about that and my opinions on that. And then aside from that, I included unique, obviously, and like the open lectures that I'd been to. But I think that obviously that's kind of difficult now, because so many prospective students won't be able to go and attend open lectures. However, there is so much on like YouTube that you can watch. There are so many podcasts, especially. And as well, I think just things like books. There are some really classic books that every single law personal statement seems to include, like Letters to a Law Student and What About Law and The Rule of Law by Tom Bingham. You'll see those on every kind of like introductory law reading list. So those are good, and I think so long as you approach it in kind of a unique way and put your own opinion in, I don't think there's any harm to mentioning those. I definitely mentioned those. I don't think I realised quite how common they were in personal statements at the time. But yeah, I think just anything you found interesting. It doesn't have to be anything like super highbrow, because realistically you're not going to understand it. Like, I still don't understand so many of the law texts that I read, and I've been studying it for 2 years. So.
Oh, that's fab. Like, it's so true. Like, I mean, I've been doing my degree for a year now. I feel like I still don't know anything. But you said, so you talked about like how there's lots of different books you can read, YouTube videos and stuff, and I was just wondering, like could you possibly, would getting like experience in a law office or something like that, would that be something valuable, or is that just like sort of a misconception, like you have to get experience in a law office?
That's a really, really good question. So I think this is really interesting, because time and time again, law tutors always say you do not need legal work experience. And I think it's so important to emphasize, because realistically, that can actually be such a huge class issue as well. Like, you know, I personally didn't really have any legal experience. I found out that one of the factories near me had a trade union issue, and so I kind of went and got some experience there to kind of just see what was going on and that kind of thing. But that was just sort of for me personally. I don't think it added that much to my personal statement as such. I think that, you know, law work experience, if you can get it, fantastic, because it is something you can talk about and talk about what you learn and kind of the issues that you dealt with. But I don't think there's anything there that you couldn't then get from something like a book or watching the news or something like that. You know, I think we need to move away from this idea that you can only kind of go into law if your dad knows a lawyer or if your mum's a lawyer, and you've shadowed a barrister and you've done X, Y, and Z, and you've been to the Houses of Parliament and done all these things. It's just not true. I mean, I come from quite a rural area near Sheffield. There's kind of one high street solicitors firm that deals with people when they're buying and selling houses. I don't think I would have got that much from going and doing some law work experience there. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely a misconception in any kind of practical degree that you need to have so much experience, because I don't think you do.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to highlight that Oxford like contextualizes everything, and they know that different people are going to have a range of contacts and like advantages over others and things, and they do take that into account. So yeah, don't stress about work experience. Yeah, that's really, really good. And then I suppose after your personal statement, you sit the LNAT, which is the law admissions test. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, so for me, this is by far the most stressful part of the admissions process. So if anybody's like practicing for it at the moment and is feeling like they're getting nowhere, please don't worry, because the average is about 45%, I think, normally each year. So like if you're not getting high grades, don't worry at all. Yeah, so I think the LNAT's a little bit different to most Oxbridge admissions tests because you do it at a test centre, so you tend to do it at the same place that you sit your driving theory test, rather than doing it in your school. And so that's kind of one way that it's kind of different and something that you need to make sure you bear in mind. And as well, just quick check, if anybody is looking to study law, normally test slots, because you book your test slot, they open on the 1st of August. So please book it like as soon as you can, because otherwise you'll run out of time and all the test slots will be taken. But anyway, aside from that, it's kind of split into 2 sections. There's a multiple choice section and then there's an essay section. So the multiple choice section is basically just the reading comprehension stuff that you did in year 6 SATs, but like times a million. You get a passage of text, and it's all random. So you could get a passage of text from like scientific literature, you could get a passage of text from the 1800s talking about philosophy, and then you get like 3 or 4 multiple choice questions on it. So it would be like, which of these does the author not mention, and it'll be A, B, C and D, and then you kind of click whichever the right answer is, which sounds really easy, but it's just not. And then you have the essay section, and again it's all about kind of no legal knowledge is required in any of it, but it's all of, you're given a statement, like for example, I think the one that I ended up answering was like, people who have self-inflicted medical conditions should have to pay for them themselves, or like should it be supported by the NHS. And so you've got to write kind of an argumentative piece on that question. And yeah, it's very different to anything that I'd done before. Like, even though I was used to writing essay subjects, it was very different because, first of all, for the kind of argumentative piece, you need to make sure that you pick a view and then you stick to it and defend it to the end, which I think when you're doing like English and history, you take this, like everything has to be very balanced and you kind of sit on the fence a little bit, I think. And although in a law essay, you definitely have to address the opposite side, you need to say ultimately like why your view is 100% better, and like even if that view's got some good points, like you're still correct. And then with the multiple choice section, the biggest thing that I would always say is just read it carefully. I remember the night before my LNAT, I did a practice test, and I think I ended up getting like 18 out of 40 or 45, because I was so panicked. I was just sat there in my bedroom, I remember it so well, and I just stressed out. I was like, oh my god, I'm not going to get into any university, never mind Oxford, with this score. And so then I went to the actual LNAT and I just thought, right, the most important thing is just stay calm, read every single word, just think about it rather than just panicking. And then like my test score nearly doubled just from doing that. And so I think just like staying calm and not overthinking everything, which is so simple, but it made the biggest difference to me.
Yeah, that's such good tips. And me and Abby are like didn't have to do an admissions test, so like we don't even know the stress that comes with it. But honestly, but we feel for you a lot. But how did you prepare for it then? How would you say is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so it's kind of difficult to prepare for because obviously there's no legal knowledge that's required, and so it's a bit like, well, how do I prepare to answer a question on like scientific stuff when I don't need any prior knowledge and that kind of thing. So I think the way that I mostly just prepared was practice. I think it's really important to get familiar with the style of the test. And so probably for like the month leading up to my LNAT, every day I would probably do about half an hour just practicing past exam questions. On the LNAT website, they have so many, so there's like just an endless supply of practice tests that you can do. Don't overdo it though. I think that when you start to overdo it, you then end up overthinking and trying to almost spot patterns or something like that, and it's just not going to help you at all. So yeah, I did that. And then in terms of essays and the essay section, I mostly just kind of would give myself a question and then like 5 minutes to do a mind map, because I think that there's most people when they're revising for their A-levels and they've got all this A-level work, it can be very difficult to then kind of find loads of time to do loads of practice essays for things like the LNAT. And so what I did instead was I would just kind of give myself a past question and 5 minutes to plan it out, because I knew that's roughly the amount of time I would have in the actual thing. And just kind of really getting used to arguing everything that I saw. Like, you know, if somebody made a comment, I would then think in my head, oh, okay, so do I actually agree with that? And why don't I agree with that? And what was their best point in favour of their argument? And how could I say, actually, no, I think something else? So a lot of my revision as such was just basically like arguing with myself most of the time, which sounds a bit crazy, but it works. I'm here now, so.
That's really, really interesting. And did you find that any of these skills that you developed for your test were like useful for your interview?
Yeah, 100%. I think like in terms of the interview, I'm sure many people say it, but it's almost like a mini tutorial. And like when I was taking the LNAT, I thought it was the most stupid thing in the whole world. I was like, this is so pointless. I don't know why I'm doing this. This is so stressful. Like, I hate it. But now as a law student, I really do understand the point of the LNAT, because those skills, like being able to digest so much information and really pick out the key arguments, and then when you're writing an essay, having a strong viewpoint and kind of defending that, I've really kind of understand why the LNAT is used, because I think that it does actually test some really vital skills in studying law. In terms of my interview, again, just because my interviews were so much like a tutorial, I think again that's just so true. This idea of being able to kind of take a piece of information and challenge it or agree with it and just like critically evaluate it was very central in my interviews in general. So I think that definitely practicing for the LNAT helps me with that.
And what was your interview experience like on the whole?
So I really enjoyed my interview experience, actually. I was so scared, literally like in tears, I think, as I walked through the doors of Worcester, because I just thought, oh God, this is going to be awful. But I actually really enjoyed it because I met so many lovely like interviewees who I'm still friends with now. And the tutors were just, you could tell they were just trying to get the best out of every single applicant. And so once I was actually in the interview and got into the sort of chats with the tutors, it was really nice. It was the first time I'd ever been able to talk to somebody who was also really interested in law and really interested in all of these kind of key debates that we have in the world today. And so it was a really pleasant experience, actually. I think that in the media there is so much so much about Oxbridge interview, scary questions, and somebody was given a tennis ball and told, this is a bomb, what would you do with it? And just randomness like that. And I think that it's really important to actually listen to people's interview experiences rather than reading The Guardian and The Times and all these kind of things, because they're always taken out of context or just not true.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important for us to be doing this and making podcasts and videos about people's experiences with their interviews, because people hear so many misconceptions and it scares them even more than
Exactly.
is needed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, definitely. So I was just wondering before we sort of like wrap it all up, are there any like top tips that you would give to a prospective law student now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that, as I said before, a lot of my kind of revision for the LNAT was all about arguing with myself in a sense. And I think it's just kind of being like critical, and I don't mean critical in like, you know, be negative about everything, critical as in like evaluate everything. So when you watch the news, kind of think, okay, what source is this coming from? Do I agree with this political decision that's been made? Why don't I agree? Do I need to find out a little bit more about this in order to understand? Because in your interview as well, it's perfectly valid to say, I don't feel like I can come to a conclusion on this because I don't know X, Y, and Z. And so I think just kind of really engaging with the things around you. And that's kind of also a good way to know whether law will be a good subject for you, because I think the essence of being a law student is generally questioning everything. I think that's kind of the essence of being a student in general. So I think that will be a good indicator as well as to whether a law degree is really for you.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think, yeah, critical and analytical thinking is essential for all Oxford degrees, but I guess especially law. And I know this sounds like we're backpedaling, but I have one more question that I think applicants will find really, really useful. Can you give me an example of one or two of interview questions that you were asked in law to show people what questions are really like in interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't kind of asked any questions as such. That sounds a bit weird, but basically before my first interview I was given a piece of legislation. It was about product liability, so something that they deliberately picked because nobody will have seen it before, and so then I read this for 10 minutes before the interview and then went into the interview, and I was then given like a scenario, and then I was sort of asked, how do you think this piece of legislation would apply to this scenario? And there were times where I got stuck. There were times where I didn't understand a particular word or a particular phrase. And I just said, oh, I don't really know what this word means. Could you help me, please? And they were always so happy to. And I think that they liked that as well. I think that they liked the fact that I was so willing to say, yeah, I don't get it. Can you help me, please? Because they always like responded really, really positively whenever I kind of just asked for help. And then my second interview, I wasn't given any text beforehand, but I was given text in the interview. It was a piece of Roman law, actually. It was about like, if you cut down a tree on private land and somebody walks past and it hits them on the head, you know, who's liable? Is anybody liable? And then from there, we just really had a discussion about it. We just sort of had a chat about whether we should ever say that somebody's liable, like could that person foresee it? And it was all just a really nice conversation. Like both of my interviews were just really nice.
Well, that's really, really nice to hear.
Oh, that's fab. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. But we've learned some really useful and interesting stuff about applying for law, and thank you so much for like sharing your personal stories with us.
Yeah,
No problem
definitely.
at all.
Yeah, it's been so good, and definitely check out Elle the Law Student on YouTube. Yeah, it's really, really valuable resource. Me and Abby have had a look at some of the videos and they are so good, so definitely check
Thank
it out.
you.
No problem. And also don't forget to check out our social media. So it's Oxford from the Inside on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, and is that everything? I think that's everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, on Facebook.
On Facebook, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So definitely,
yeah.
So definitely check us out on there, and yeah, you should find our episodes. We have the video episodes and just the audio too.
So I hope you all stay safe and well, and until next time, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.